Hey everybody, it's Susan with Susan Monroe Art, and I am so excited for today's tutorial because I'm going to be talking about how to paint glass. It's my favorite thing to paint. I've done tons of paintings with glass because I think it's challenging and it's pretty and it's really cool. And here is the painting I'm going to be showing you today. I painted it just for this tutorial, a mason jar. I cut off the flowers at the top because I really wanted to focus on just painting the jar so you could see that. So this is what I'm going to be showing you to do today. And we're going to be talking about hard edges, soft edges, painting wet and wet, wet on dry. We'll get all into these interesting terms, and you'll be able to, hopefully at the end of this, paint something that looks sort of like this. So I can't wait. It's going to be great. And while I have you, I want to say thank you for watching my channel. And if you like this video, will you please give it a thumbs up, and then you can click subscribe and click the bell icon if you'd like to be notified when I make other videos, and subscribe to my channel. I try to make a video every week or two depending on what's happening in my life. And if you could leave a comment, that's always welcome as well. I try to answer all my comments. Any interaction you can do with this video will really help my YouTube channel, will help my videos to be seen by other people, and help me to share my love of painting and watercolor. So that being said, let's get busy, and I'll show you how I painted this. So people feel like glass is a very challenging subject to paint because they think of it almost as something that's invisible. And of course, glass is not invisible. Here is a glass jar. You can see it very clearly in my hand. The difference is that it is transparent. It's clear, so you can see through it. And the important thing then to remember when you're painting glass is you're going to be painting, in some areas, the thickness of the glass. In other areas, you're going to be painting refraction. In some places, you're going to be painting reflections. So thickness would be places like the bottom of the glass, or maybe some of these edges up here where you're actually able to see the thickness of the glass, and that'll have its own color to it. So you could be painting the thickness in the thicker areas of the glass. Then you're going to be painting reflections, of course, wherever light is striking the glass. Some reflections will be pure white, others might have a reflected color in them, some will have a sharp edge, and some will have a soft edge. And the ones with a soft edge, I generally use my scrubber brush to help bring those out. And then refraction is when you look through the glass and it distorts the objects that you're seeing on the other side. The light is coming through and the light is being bent by the glass and distorting what you're seeing. So for example, my physics teacher would be so proud of me, Ms. McLeese. I put this in here, hopefully this is working, and you can see where it hits the water, and then it looks different under the water than it does above the water. That is refraction. The water and the glass is changing how you're seeing this brush because the light is hitting it differently. I think that there's also refraction even when there is not water in an area, a lot of the times from the curvature of a glass or the difference in its shape. Let's see if I can show that with this. As we get in with our painting, you'll be able to see more of what I'm talking about. But those are the things to think about when you're painting glass: the thickness of the glass, refraction, and reflection. That's it for the science portion of the art lesson. It's much easier than it sounds to paint. Let me show you how. I decided to start with the shadow before I started with the actual glass, and I'm going to show you how I painted that. I wanted the shadow to come off to the left, and if you look at the cutaway picture to your right, and there you can see where the shadow is to the left of the glass, and then there are little lines of light that are coming through the shadow because of the water. So I'm painting wet and wet to do this. I've wet all the area where I want shadow, and now I'm going in with a little cerulean blue and Davies gray, and I'm painting in those pathways where I see shadow, and I'm going to leave those areas that are light free of paint. And it's going to have a real soft edge and a real soft look like the actual shadow does. It's really important to keep referring back to your photo, though, to make sure you're getting the angles correct and things like that. And also, these glasses have a shadow underneath them, not just a cast shadow, but a shadow underneath them that you'll need to put in as well. When you paint wet and wet, you can adjust it a little bit, but you don't want to keep going back in once it starts to dry, because then you'll mess it up. You'll end up with blooms and lifting the paint. And then I dragged that paint over and covered the rest of the tablecloth with just a little bit of blue to give it just a touch of color. Now I think I'm finally ready to start actually painting the glass. And before I approach something this complex, I always take a good look at it and remind myself that the best way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. Because if I looked at this and thought, oh my gosh, I've got to, where do I start? How do I begin? You just have to break it down. So I divide my jar mentally into sections. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do the top of the jar. This area definitely stands out as a section. This, all sort of the same color green, and then we have this little cloudy area. I would probably just work all of that together. This is where the surface of the water is going to be a section for me. Look, all these greens, same shapes, same shades, will be another section. This dark area here will be a section, and then there's another section right here, and then I'll have the bottom be my final section. And when I break it up like that, I'm not going to worry about anything. Squeaky noise outside my house. I'm not going to worry about anything other than the section I'm on. When I'm done, I'll balance all the colors and make them come together, but that's going to be the way I'm going to approach this. So I'm going to start at the top, which what I think is probably one of the most difficult areas is this top up here. I'll probably blow it up, and I'm just going to paint what I see. I see the green here. I see darker greens right here. I'm just going to go in, and it'll be like painting a little abstract painting all up in here. I'm just going to paint what I see in the top of the jar without regard as to whether it's making sense to me or not. I'm not going to engage my brain and say, but what is that little green area? I'm not going to worry about it. There's a little green area there. I'm going to paint that green area. So let me get going and show you how this starts. So I'm showing in this part of the video how slowly I paint in real time. I have to take my time. I have to look back at the photo and then back at the drawing, and it's a constant back and forth of what I see and how I want to interpret it in my painting. So the painting is pretty slow going, and I'm going to have to speed it up during the rest of the video, just otherwise this would take over 2 hours, and nobody wants to sit here for 2 hours. But if you're taking a long time to do this work and it's going really slowly, don't worry. That means you're doing it right. I just wanted to show you exactly how slow it really goes for me. And this painting, all in all, probably took about 2 hours and 45 minutes to do. That's just the jar section, not the flowers in the background, which I already painted, because this video isn't about painting flowers or backgrounds. It's about painting the glass, and that's what I really wanted to focus on. So here you go, some really slow painting. And after this, now I'm going to speed it up so we can get through this, and you'll still see what I'm doing. You'll get the idea. As you can see, I've already added the masking fluid to this painting. It's an easy thing to add the masking fluid. I've got several videos on how to apply masking fluid that you could look at if you're not comfortable with it yet. But I just went in and literally any spot on the photo that had a highlight or a particularly light area that I was afraid I would paint over accidentally, I just put the masking fluid on it. Didn't matter if it was a soft edge area, a hard edge area. If I was afraid I was going to paint over it by accident, I put the masking fluid on it. Particularly up at the top where the strings, I don't know what it's called, where you screw the lid on and they have those raised areas. They have a lot of white, long reflections that are great to put masking fluid on. Of course, that big reflection at the top of the glass, and then further down where the writing is on the glass, where it says car and it says Mason, the highlights on those letters I made sure to put masking fluid on. And then anywhere else that was a really light area or was a highlight, I just put in some masking fluid. You know, it's easy. If I don't think I need it, I can always lift it up. But I really never regret putting it on. It really helps me to paint more freely because I'm not constantly worrying about painting over top of some place that I need to leave white. So I'm matching where I put the masking fluid with the spot in the painting, and then I'm using that as a marker, a road map. I see that above this white spot, which is being held by this piece of masking fluid, there is a dark gray line. Then under it is some lighter grays, maybe a little lavender. I'm really using these spots of masking fluid to help me not get lost in the complexity of the design. You have to have some sort of anchor point to keep you in the right spot. Another thing you'll notice as you are working on your glass painting is you can get almost in like this zen-like state. You can get lost in just the colors and the shapes, the abstraction of what you're working in. And it's a really cool place to be. It's really fun to feel that. The real enjoyment of this is just sort of losing yourself in the abstraction of it all and not feeling like it has to be so precise. This is going to come out fine no matter what you do. It is all going to be okay, because you know what? In the long run, is anybody going to be holding up the photo of the jar next to your painting? Nope. And if they do, say, I don't like you, and stop it. You know, it's a very forgiving subject, glass and flowers, I think. Okay, I have the jar filled in, just this top, the screw lid part, the screw part. I don't usually take the masking fluid off until I'm through with the whole thing, but for this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and take this masking fluid off here and then show you how I make corrections where the masking fluid should be or shouldn't have been, and soften some of those edges, because it'll look really harsh when you take that masking fluid off. Those edges are just really sharp because your eye has gotten used to looking at it this way. You take them off and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? So here we go. All right, great. So now you can see some of those bright whites that I've wanted in there that I masked off, and where some of the darks complement those. Now I'm going to go back and try and match up the areas where I left the masking fluid with the same areas on my painting. And some of them need to have a little color added. Some of them need to be softened. For example, this one right here is lavender. I'm going to go add that lavender. This one here is lavender. I'm going to go add more lavender. I'm just going to take a look and see what needs to be done. Okay, there we go. I think I'm satisfied with that for now, and now I'm going to move on down to one of the areas in the lower part of my glass. So I started painting this little section with paint on dry paper, but it's very soft looking in the photo, so I think this would be a great opportunity for me to paint wet into wet, to wet the paper and paint the wet paint on there, and then it'll blend together, make some fun, interesting shapes. It'll be a lot like the shapes that are in the glass. So let me do that. I'm using my paper towel to get off some of the water on my brush, and then I can mop up any places that I think are too wet. Learning to do wet on wet is a technique that has been difficult for me to work with because the paper's too wet or too dry, but I've stuck with it and I think I've gotten better at it. So now I've dried the wet on wet area, and I'm going to go back in and paint some of the details and the sharper lines that I see by painting wet on dry, wet paint on dry paper. So I have to apologize. My camera shut off while I was painting that area that's the surface of the water, and so I don't have a recording of that. But we'll just move on down to the next section of the jar. Here I'm starting to work on the lettering where it says car. And I think that just that upper section, though, has shown pretty much what my technique is for painting any glass. I divide it into smaller sections mentally. I put down clear water and paint the background colors that I see wet on wet. I let that dry, and then I paint wet on dry to put in details. And to do those details, I really pay close attention to my reference photo and use markers on the page, generally my masking fluid, to make sure I'm putting those tiny lines, those small dots, those small variations in the right place on my painting. And that being said, if you put one in the wrong place, it's probably not going to be a big deal, because remember, we're looking at water in refraction. We're painting basically the refraction part of the picture here. It's going to be distorted anyway, so if there's something that's in a slightly off place, nobody's going to know but you. So not that that gives you liberty to be sloppy, but don't sweat the small stuff. So from now on, I think I'm going to put on a little music. I'm going to let y'all watch me finish painting the body of this jar, and once I get to taking off the masking fluid, I will come back. So finally we are at one of my favorite parts of the painting, which is taking off the masking fluid. And as I said before, it's always a little shocking to see suddenly all these white spaces on there. But then you can just go back and you adjust them. You paint the shades you see within the highlighted areas. Like not every place where you've had masking fluid is going to be white. Some of them will have lighter colors in them. And I'll also take my scrubbing brush, my oil paint brush that I showed at the beginning, and scrub gently around the edges of a lot of those highlights just to soften them, particularly that large curved highlight that's stored at the top of the glass. In the photo, that's a very sort of foggy looking area. So that's what I am going to get busy on doing now, really looking carefully at my photo and then coming back in, painting wet on dry and adding all those little details and alterations to where I've had the masking fluid. Okay, we're almost done here, and at this point I was just looking at the entire painting and thinking, what do I like, what do I dislike, and I really decided that the background and the jar were too much the same shade of green. I really wanted to make that glass pop a little bit more, so I decided to take a chance and go in and darken the background and see how that worked. So I'm going to flip the painting upside down, because that was an easier way for me to paint. I wasn't having to bring the brush full of paint across where I had already painted and risk dripping little drops on my completed jar. And came back in and just cut in around all the flowers and everything and added some black and softened some edges around where I wanted to suggest leaves. And you can let me know what you think about how it turned out. And here's the finished piece. So please let me know in the comments what you think about it and what you think about this technique. I hope you'll find it helpful. And once again, please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it and think about subscribing to my channel. Thanks so much for watching. Bye-bye.